Today we're going to talk a little bit about narratives. Now, you do have a narrative outline, pre-writing document. That's where you're going to kind of start thinking about ideas. What do I want to write about? What kind of details am I going to provide? Those types of things. That is going to be due Friday. So it's really important that in the next couple of days, you come up with an idea for the paper. You will have a rough draft due on Sunday that your peers will kind of look at and then respond to, which will then get turned into a final draft by next Friday, the 17th. So let's go ahead and go through this PowerPoint together, and I'll give you guys some clarity on what narratives are. This week for readings, you will do a few things. You'll read Bourdain, which is a great narrative about Anthony Bourdain, the famous chef, and kind of how he got into cooking. He actually wrote an entire memoir, and so this is just one chapter, and I picked this chapter because this is a chapter that was pivotal to his life. He decided to learn about food because he went on this trip to Europe where his parents were really into food, and he just didn't understand until they left him out of that one dining experience, and it really made it snap in his head, and he was like, hey, food can be really exciting for people. What's what's the big deal about food? And so that really was a pivotal moment for him. The Amy Tan piece is another piece about a pivotal moment. It's about a young girl going through puberty and kind of trying to grow up and reconcile her identity as a Chinese American with her desire to be more American so that she can fit in. And it's kind of about appreciating, her learning to appreciate her cultural heritage and some tough lessons, that we learn in life as we grow up. The Chase by Gwendolyn is also in the reading, and I really love this piece because again, it's another kind of coming of age pivotal moment for this woman that as a child she just learned the value of perseverance, not giving up. This crazy guy in a suit chases her throughout the neighborhood. She never thought that an adult would chase a child, but it's about perseverance and not giving up, and this idea that not giving up can make a huge impact on your life. So your narratives are they might not be so, awe-inspiring as some of these famous authors, because you might think, oh, I'm only 18, I'm only 22, I'm only 25. What have I done so far in life? But what I want you to do is focus on, what have I done that's changed my life? What has been important to me? What moments, what snapshots have really been critical for me? So Back to the Lake has a few different sections on narratives, and you'll see that in the readings. So let's go ahead and go through the Little Seagull Handbook has some information, and these Back to the Lake section. So the key elements of a narrative is they're a well-told story. It's a situation that needs a resolution. They often include really vivid details. So you'll notice in the Tan piece that, she talks about fish cheeks, and she talks about all of these really vivid details like slimy food and these things that really are descriptive of the dinner that they had. Bourdain, he uses such amazing imagery. He talks about the kind of old World War II barracks on the beaches, and he talks about he describes the adults, like the captain of the boat that he meets in vivid detail. He likens his experience with trying new foods as almost as like losing his virginity, right? So he's trying to give us a very visceral idea of what his experience is like. So vivid detail is really important in narratives. And then significant, remember that it's all about, like, so what? So why did it matter that you spent the summer as a camp counselor? Well, maybe it really instilled in you a value of wanting to do something for kids with, with that came from rough backgrounds, or maybe it really it helped you to want to become a teacher or become a guidance counselor. So there should be some significance. And besides telling a story, why else might you use narrative? Now you might think, well, this class is supposed to teach me about college writing. I'm not going to be a famous writer. No one cares about my story, right? I think that sometimes. Who cares about my story? But the thing is that we use narrative in a lot of ways. We can use narrative in argument. Narrative helps teach us good description. We can use it in cause and effect. We are constantly using narrative in our everyday life. You meet somebody and you're talking to them, and all of a sudden you're telling them about, oh yeah, yesterday I tried to do this and this happened, right? We're always using examples. You might be in a meeting with your boss, and your boss says, hey, it was brought to my attention that there was a problem on your shift, we had a customer complaint, and then you're telling your side of the story. Or you might bring it attention to your boss, hey, we've had a lot of customers that are wanting us to offer this service. I was thinking that maybe we could do that, and here's my idea, right? You're telling a story. So there's so many ways that we can tell stories, and we use storytelling constantly in our lives. When we meet new people, when we hang out with our friends, when we are in our careers, when we're in a job, narrative is just a part of our life as human beings. So it's a really, really great way to kind of help you get comfortable with writing and teach you some really valuable skills. Again, teaching you the value of examples of description is really key. So choosing a topic is going to be the thing that most of you struggle with this week. It could be, think of any kind of big event that's happened in your life. It could be humorous, it can be embarrassing, anything that was interesting. Think of a challenge that you've overcome. What have you done in your life that's been challenging for you? Maybe it was just as simple as getting your foot in the door and getting enrolled and taking this first step here at TMCC to take this class. That's going to be a huge life-changing decision for you. So that would be a great thing to write about. Origins of an attitude or belief. Maybe you became a Buddhist a couple of summers ago, and you know what prompted that decision? What made you want to explore that religion or that faith system? Maybe you joined the Young Republicans or the Young Democrats in high school as just kind of a way to like hang out with your friends, and then you became really passionate about politics. Maybe you have a memory that's really vivid, and it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I remember this happened to me, it was really traumatic, or this happened to me and it was really exciting and it really taught me a valuable lesson. Anything of those natures, those are all great ways to kind of start brainstorming. One thing that I like to do when I am writing is I always keep like I keep like a little notebook or a notepad or something around. And one thing that you can do, and actually your pre-writing document asks you to do this, is just make a list. So just make a list of ideas. Okay. So for me, I actually took 2 years off between high school and my bachelor's degree, and my plan was always to go to college. I got excellent grades. I had a lot of college credits when I graduated high school, but I just kind of got lost for a little bit. I had some really rough stuff happening in my family, and then my stepdad actually committed suicide. He passed away when I was just before I turned 20, and that really kind of reset my intentions. I just kind of realized, life's too short. Life is too short. So I might write about that kind of change, like what happened to me in those 2 years. How did that reset my focus and reset my life? And now I have a PhD, so um, you know, for me, that was a really pivotal moment in my life. It kind of spurred me to get back into school. I always wanted to get a master's degree and perhaps a PhD, so it really kind of helped me reset my focus and get back into it. So choosing a topic is going to be the hard part, but there are a lot of ways that you can brainstorm. Start with making a list of just these 4 bullet points here: events that have happened, challenges, origins of an attitude or belief, or memories that are still vivid. Start with a list. That's the best way to start, and then you can start narrowing it. All right, so when we want to generate ideas, we can do a lot of different things. So we can brainstorm. That's where we just, free write, we bubble, we cluster, you just come up with ideas, right? Looping is really interesting because what looping is you're making a list of ideas, and then you take in one of the things from your list, and then you make a list of sub ideas from there. So you kind of loop back around on itself to narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow. And it really helps you to kind of define a topic and what direction you're going to go. Questioning is a great way as well. And remember that these ideas for writing aren't just about narrative. You can use this for your rhetorical analysis. You can use it for your argument. When you get into 102 and you have to do a research paper, you can use it for that. If you have a political science paper for your, political science 101 class, or for your history class, or for your core humanities class, you can use any of these ideas. So questioning, say that you're writing a history paper and you have to write it on World War II. Questioning, why did America get involved in World War II? What finally made them decide to get involved after, a few years of inactivity? What was the perception of the American people when they decided to get involved? Were they happy? Were they upset? So questioning is a great way to get ideas for a paper. Describing, just sitting down and describing an issue. So let's say for your proposal papers or proposal presentations at the end of this class, you might say, okay, I want to write a proposal about what we should do to return safely to campus, because I really don't like these online classes. I want to be face-to-face. So I'm going to propose a good plan for TMCC to get back to campus. Describe. Sit down, just write a paragraph. Right now, government is saying we should wear face masks. The World Health Organization is suggesting these things. Here are good sanitary procedures. You just sit down and describe, write as much as you know about it. For your memoir or for your narrative piece, a dialogue between two people might be a great way to start writing. And then just write what happened. So like with this narrative, just sit down and write. Just write all the details you can remember as if you're telling a stranger a story for the first time. All right, so once you get some ideas, then you can get into organizing. For narrative, we really want to look back at, and I'm sure that you guys all remember what's called plot diagram or Freytag's pyramid. And so that is, remember how a story progresses. So we start with the exposition, which is the background information that includes characters and setting. So for your narratives, you're obviously going to be the main character, but who else is important in your narrative? Now, it might be a story. Hold on just a second. Sorry, my kitty's wanting to get in my window, so I'm just going to open that for her. Otherwise, she's going to make a cameo. So for your exposition, your main characters, you might have a best friend who, is really important to you during that time, but does that best friend pertain to the story? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. You have to decide who is important in your story, who directly relates to the story, what background information is pertinent, and what settings are pertinent. You don't just want to describe everyone in your life when you were 16. You want to describe the people who are important in making, the story a story. Rising action, it doesn't always have to be 3 major events, but I always encourage people to start with at least 3 major events that add to the suspense or tension. What kind of is the catalyst for getting the story? How do we climb that mountain? The climax is the most suspenseful part of the plot, so that's like kind of the big aha moment. Then we have falling action, 2 to 3 events that kind of like help wrap things up. Resolution, so that's when the conflict is resolved, and then denouement, which is the tying up of loose ends. So I'm going to take an example for you. Let's look at the tan piece, fish cheeks. So the exposition would be when she's describing her family in America. Okay, she describes a little bit throughout the story. She describes what her house looks like. She describes her family members. She describes the pastor and his family. Rising action, when she finds out that, or sorry, we'll look at the initial incident. That kind of happens when she finds out that the pastor has invited, or the pastor has been invited for dinner, and she's so nervous about his son coming, right? And so rising action would be kind of her worrying about what she's going to wear, figuring out what her mom's going to cook, figuring out that all of these family members are coming. All of these different events and these details that she tells us are all part of that rising action. The climax is probably sometime around when they're having dinner and her mother makes the comments that embarrasses her so much about the fish cheeks being her favorite part, and her just being terrified that the pastor and his son are judging her, right? And then the falling action is kind of her getting over her embarrassment and then talking to her mom and realizing that, she can't undo these events. She's embarrassed, all of those kind of things that happen after the pastor and his son leave. The denouement and the resolution kind of this are when she says at the very end, I realized that my mother had created all my favorite dishes. And this is her realizing that her mother loved her and her family was important and her culture was important. So that's kind of that conflict resolution there. So your story should have a nice Freytag's pyramid. You should have a beginning, middle, and end. You should have some good details to back that up, and you should have these kind of elements, and make sure that you have a logical order. The easiest way to do a story is to just do it in order of chronology, so chronological order. First this happened, then this, then this. Tan's piece is in chronological order. So in chronological order, we introduce the story, we describe the setting and the people, we tell what happened, we say how the conflict was resolved, and then at the end we give that significance. Again, that, I realized that my mom made all my favorite foods. Another option is to begin in the middle. Several times you'll see this in writing where they begin in the middle of a story, action to give enough information to provide an overview of what happened. And then they want to fill in the details, the setting, people, specific actions. So you're using flashback maybe, and then you're you're tying up the story. So this is, a lot of movies will start here where they you see a huge explosion, action movies especially, and then you kind of flash back and you see who the people are, what caused the explosion, why is this important, and then the end happens. Another way to do it is beginning at the end. So there's a lot of stories that do this as well, where you'll say, like, oh yeah, so we got married and lived happily ever after, but this is what happened to lead up to that. So again, we're going to use flashback here. Beginning at the end or the middle are very similar strategies. It just depends on where you think the most excitement is. It's a way to hook your reader in. All right, so once you have brainstorm, you have your idea, you come up with a pre-write, so you know exactly what you're going to say. You figure out, am I going to write in chronological order? I would suggest starting with that if you're not a strong writer. Am I going to use flashback? What am I going to do? You write your draft, your peer is going to help look at it, but then you have to get into revision, right? Revision is so important in writing. Most of the time, what we want to do is we just want to write one draft. We often wait until right before it's due. But the thing is, writing only gets better through revision. I can guarantee you that revising your paper will always, 100% of the time, create a better paper. I can also guarantee you that 100% of the time, your first draft is not going to be as good as a revised, finished, polished draft. It is a hard lesson to learn, but once you and a lot of students don't like peer review, makes them nervous. But once you do it, and even if you feel like your peer group maybe wasn't the most helpful, they will help you to give a more critical read of your own paper. It's so important to have that critical eye. I'm actually going to post in the additional resources module a list of ways that you can self-revise as well, because these are all really great ways to kind of help you to think about, how do I revise more critically? All right, so some tips for revision and thinking about things with a critical eye. The purpose and audience. Always think about what your purpose and what your audience is. If you're writing an argument, your purpose is to convince. And who's your audience? People who maybe might be on the fence about your topic or against your idea. Not the people who already agree with you, right? Because there's no point in convincing them. They're already on your side. The story. Think about the story. Do you have all the elements of Freytag's pyramid on there for a narrative? Freytag's pyramid doesn't really apply to things like argument or compare and contrast, but it definitely does to narrative. So is there more to the story that you didn't say, or did you go out of order? Is it confusing? What's the point of your paper? Is the point to tell a story? Is the point to teach a lesson? Is the point to convince somebody of something? Is the point to analyze? What's the point? How is it organized? So think about your paragraphs. Do they make sense? Do you need to reorder them? Is there one paragraph that maybe makes sense before or after a different paragraph? Are there transitions? So every single paragraph, does it make sense? Does it flow into the next one? Do your ideas flow? Over the whole entire paper, do your ideas flow? Looking at transitions on a sentence level, on a paragraph level, and a whole paper level is really important. I'll also post a list of transition words in that additional resources. Dialogue and point of view. Do you have dialogue? Do you need more dialogue if you're telling a good story? Point of view, are you telling it from first person? Make sure that you don't have any point of view shifts. Sometimes when we're telling a story, we might shift all of a sudden to a different perspective. Make sure that you're in one point of view. Are there details that could be added? Do you have a beginning, end? Do you have a middle? Do you have all the parts that a story should have, that a paper should have? And then look at common errors. There are things like tense. Do your tenses shift, right? Am I talking in present tense and then all of a sudden I'm in past? Make sure that you don't have tense shifts unless you're employing flashback. Okay, so sorry about that. My recording stopped and I think I've got it started again. So this is the last slide in this slideshow. And so what we have is we have Sanders, Lynn, and Ragonetti Associates. It's a law firm. We have a license plate that says was his, okay? And we have obviously a very nice car. It's a convertible. It's, I can't really read what the style is and I'm not very good at cars, so I'm sure one of you knows what kind of car it is. It's nice, right? So this tells a story. First of all, we know it's a law firm, and we know it says was his, so that implies that either the person driving the car was his, so probably an ex-wife, right? It's a attorney office, but it also is a kind of a double entendre, which means it has two meanings. Was his, the vehicle was his. So this law firm is kind of bragging, saying like, hey, we got her some nice stuff. Like, choose us for your lawyers, we'll get you paid, right? So it's it definitely tells a story. on two different levels. And something as simple as a snapshot can tell a story. So that is what I want you to think about, being really analytical, critical thinkers. When you read little snapshots, when you see stories, especially next week when we get into rhetorical analysis, it's so important to look at little details like that. You might look at a picture and say, how can that be a narrative? But you can look at all these different little aspects and you can really kind of see, oh, I understand how that could be a story. If you guys have any questions, of course, as usual, just let me know. I hope that this slideshow has helped clarify narrative, and I really hope that you guys come up with some great ideas. I want you to start by brainstorming a little bit, working on that pre-writing document, and shoot me emails if you have any questions. Happy Tuesday.